The instinct to give more is a natural one, rooted in a sincere desire to build something secure and meaningful. A man sees someone he values, and his first impulse is often to demonstrate his worth through action: more time, more attention, more emotional investment. He operates on the premise that relationship security is a direct transaction, a simple equation where his deposits of effort will yield a guaranteed return of loyalty and affection. This logic feels sound, even noble, but it ignores a fundamental, counterintuitive truth of human psychology. Abundance, when it is constant and effortless, does not create value. It dilutes it. The very things offered to cement a bond can, when given without restraint, become the reason it weakens. This phenomenon isn't about a person being ungrateful. It's about the universal way the human mind assigns worth. We are neurologically wired to prioritize what is scarce and to overlook what is perpetually available. Consider the most basic necessities. The air we breathe is essential for life, yet we scarcely think of it because its supply is infinite and automatic. Conversely, a limited resource, even one far less critical, immediately commands our focus and effort. This principle translates directly into interpersonal dynamics. When your presence, your validation, and your attention become as readily available and predictable as air, they undergo the same psychological process. They become background noise, the default setting of the relationship. She doesn't have to wonder about it, work for it, or even fully appreciate it because it is simply always there. Your constant giving creates a state of emotional comfort that, over time, borders on complacency. The alternative is not to become absent or neglectful, but to transition from a state of careless abundance to one of intentional scarcity. This is where the real power lies. When you consciously choose to do less, to not always be the first to text, to not fill every silence with reassurance, to not make your entire schedule revolve around her availability, you are not subtracting value. You are creating it. You are shifting your attention from a free commodity to a prized artifact. Each interaction, because it is not guaranteed, gains significance. A compliment given sparingly is turned over in the mind, its meaning examined and cherished. A planned evening together becomes an event to be anticipated rather than just another expected occurrence. Your time is no longer a given. It is a gift. And it is in this space of uncertainty that value is crystallized. She is forced to mentally reach for you, to actively consider your place in her life, because you are no longer just passively there. This approach communicates something far more profound than disinterest. It signals a deep and unshakable sense of self-worth. A man who gives his time indiscriminately communicates that his time has little value. A man who is always available on demand suggests he has nothing more important to do. But the man who does less, who gives selectively and with purpose, sends a clear message. My life is full, my time is precious, and my attention is earned. This is not a game being played. It is a standard being set. It forces her to see you not as a provider of validation, but as a person of substance, whose presence in her life is a privilege, not a right. The scarcity you create isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to replace. Because you have demonstrated that you value yourself too much to offer your most precious resources without reciprocity. In this way, doing less becomes the very foundation upon which true appreciation and lasting value are built. The common reaction to turbulence in a relationship is to grasp tighter, to pour more energy into the void in the hope of stabilizing it. When she creates distance, the instinct is to close the gap with relentless pursuit: more texts, more plans, more pleading conversation. When her mood shifts or a conflict arises, the impulse is to smother the emotional fire with frantic effort, trying to fix, solve, and soothe until the discomfort passes. This approach, while born from a desire to connect, paradoxically signals a profound weakness. It reveals a man whose inner stability is dependent on her external state of mind. A man who crumbles when faced with silence, and who panics when control slips from his fingers. True strength, the kind that forges unshakable respect, is not demonstrated by what you do, but by what you can calmly choose not to do. This is the discipline of restraint. It is the conscious decision not to chase when she pulls away, not because you are indifferent, but because you respect the space she has created and trust the strength of your own position. It is the choice not to engage in every emotional skirmish she may initiate, understanding that not every storm requires you to be the anchor. Some must be weathered alone for her to understand their consequence. Your role in these moments is not that of a frantic first responder, but of a steady, immovable pillar. You remain calm. You remain steady. You remain reserved. This is not a cold or passive state. It is an active and powerful demonstration of emotional control. By refusing to be drawn into the chaos, you communicate that your peace is not negotiable and that your equilibrium is not hers to disrupt. The impact of this composure is transformative. A woman, often subconsciously, tests a man not out of malice, but out of a deep-seated need to feel secure in his strength. She needs to know that the man she is with will not be swayed by her temporary emotions, that his frame is stronger than her moods. The man who overreacts, who scrambles to meet her every demand and soothe her every fluctuation, fails this test. He proves that he can be controlled, that his actions are a direct reaction to her behavior. In contrast, the man who does less, who stands still in the face of her shifting winds, presents a formidable and magnetic figure. His lack of reaction is not a void, but a statement. It tells her that he is not easily moved, that his validation comes from within, and that he will not be emotionally manipulated. This creates a profound and lasting attraction, rooted not in the fleeting highs of constant attention, but in the bedrock of unwavering respect. This restraint signals a strength that endless effort can never counterfeit. A man who does everything but crumbles under pressure reveals the fragility of his persona. His actions are a performance, a desperate attempt to prove a worth he fears he does not inherently possess. But a man who does less, yet remains solid and self-possessed, demonstrates that his strength is not an act. It is his core. He does not need to fill the silence with promises or the distance with pursuit because he is secure in his own value. His calmness in the face of her storm is the ultimate proof of his power. It shows her that he is a source of stability, not a source of drama. In that steadiness, she finds something far more valuable than constant attention, the confidence that she is with a man who will not break. And in that, she can finally feel safe. The dynamic of a relationship is much like a financial investment. The party that has contributed the least capital is always the one with the least to lose. When a man falls into the pattern of overgiving, he unintentionally creates a lopsided economy of affection where he is the sole producer, and his partner is the comfortable consumer. He exhausts himself, pouring his emotional and temporal resources into her. Believing this one-way flow is the price of admission for her loyalty. However, this setup fosters not gratitude, but entitlement. She grows accustomed to the constant influx without ever having to consider the cost to him. She sits in the receiver's seat, passive and increasingly complacent. While he depletes his own reserves in a frantic effort to keep her satisfied, this is not a partnership. It is a service arrangement. It breeds a quiet resentment in the giver and a subtle laziness in the taker. The conscious shift to doing less is the strategic correction of this imbalance. It is not a withdrawal of love, but a restructuring of the relationship's economy. By pausing the endless flow of validation, time, and attention, you create a vacuum. This silence, this space where your efforts used to be, is uncomfortable. Nature, and human nature, abhors a vacuum. She is suddenly confronted with the absence of the energy she had come to expect as her due. This confrontation is not punitive. It is clarifying. It forces her to ask a fundamental question. What must I do to re-engage his interest? In that moment, the entire dynamic pivots. She is no longer a passive recipient. She is prompted to become an active participant. She realizes that your validation is not a guaranteed entitlement, but a currency that must be earned. Your attention is not a free public utility, but a private resource granted to those who contribute to its source. This is the moment where genuine investment begins. To fill the vacuum you have created, she must now bring her own effort. She may text first, plan a date, or offer reassurance. This initial investment, however small, is critical. The psychological principle of commitment and consistency tells us that people value what they have invested in. When she begins to contribute her own time, emotion, and energy into the shared space of the relationship, she is no longer just a consumer of its benefits. She becomes a stakeholder in its success. She has skin in the game. The relationship is no longer just about what she can get from you, but about what you are building together, a project to which she is now actively contributing. This shift transforms her perception of you. You are no longer a service provider, but a valuable partner whose cooperation she must work to maintain. Ultimately, this rebalancing act does more than just make her value you more. It builds a healthier, more resilient partnership. A relationship where only one person gives is destined for burnout and collapse under the weight of its own inequality. By doing less, you force a dynamic of reciprocity. You create the conditions where she is motivated to invest, and through that investment, she develops a deeper, more personal stake in the bond you share. The relationship ceases to be a one-man performance and becomes a duet. It is no longer sustained by the exhausting effort of a single person, but by the mutual contribution of two, ensuring that both parties respect the bond because both have worked to build it. Predictability is the silent killer of attraction. In the early stages of a relationship, the thrill is often fueled by the unknown, the mystery of what the other person is thinking, feeling, or planning next. This uncertainty creates a low-level, persistent cognitive engagement. She wonders about you, and in that wondering, you occupy her mental space. The man who does more systematically dismantles this mystery by being constantly available, always texting first. And quick to explain his every action and emotion, he becomes an open book. While honesty is a virtue, a complete lack of emotional and behavioral nuance renders a person utterly predictable. This gives her a subconscious sense of power, as she can reliably anticipate your moves. She knows that a cold shoulder from her will be met with increased warmth from you. She knows that a moment of distance will trigger your pursuit. This predictability allows her to manipulate the dynamic without even thinking maliciously. She simply learns the levers that guarantee your response, and in doing so, the thrilling uncertainty that once defined your connection evaporates. The power of doing less is that it shatters this predictable pattern and reintroduces the essential element of mystery. When you choose to withhold instead of flood, to pause instead of react, you remove her ability to forecast your behavior. You become an enigma. She doesn't know if your silence is a sign of quiet confidence or simple preoccupation with your own purpose. She doesn't know if you'll respond to a provocative text or if you'll simply let it hang in the digital air, forcing her to sit with its implications. This lack of predictability does not create confusion in a destructive sense, but rather a captivating curiosity. It keeps her mentally on edge, not with anxiety, but with intrigue. Her mind, seeking closure and pattern, is forced to actively work to understand you. This cognitive engagement is a powerful engine of attraction. You are no longer a solved puzzle, but a compelling narrative that she feels compelled to follow. This practice is fundamentally about holding your frame. In every relationship, there exists a battle of frames, an unspoken struggle over whose reality, whose set of rules, and whose emotional landscape will define the partnership. Her frame is often emotional, fluid, and reactive, shifting with her daily moods and perceptions. The predictable man, the one who does more, inevitably collapses into her frame. He abandons his own plans, principles, and peace to appease her ever-changing emotional state. He is a guest in the house of her reality, desperately trying to prove he belongs. The man who does less, however, remains rooted firmly in his own frame. His frame is built on logic, purpose, and unwavering self-respect. He does not explain every decision or justify his need for space. He simply holds his ground. When she tests him she inevitably will to gauge his strength. He doesn't scramble to re-enter her good graces. He remains calm and steady within his own. This calmness in the face of her tests is what ultimately makes your frame the dominant one. It teaches her, through action rather than argument, that your reality is solid, reliable, and unshakable. Her emotional waves crash against your steady shore and recede, having changed nothing. This is when real, deep-seated attraction takes root. She is not attracted to a man she can control, but to a man whose own inner structure is so sound that she can feel safe within it. By doing less and preserving your mystery, you stop being a predictable actor in her play and become the director of your own, inviting her into a world that is more compelling and stable than the one she could create alone. The entire philosophy of doing less ultimately circles back to a single, foundational point: it is not about her. It is about you. The previous chapters explored the external effects, how restraint builds value, commands respect, rebalances investment, and creates mystery. But these are merely the outcomes, the natural consequences of a far more critical internal shift. The true power of this practice is that it forges a man who is no longer dependent on a relationship for his sense of worth, a man whose identity and stability are generated from within. This is the final and most important transformation. For a man who is complete in himself is a man who is truly free. And that freedom is the most powerful attractant of all. When a man pours every ounce of his energy into pleasing a woman, he commits a slow, quiet form of self-abandonment. He redirects the focus, time, ambition that should be fueling his own life and purpose into the bottomless pit of her validation. He begins to see himself through her eyes, measuring his value by her smiles, her approval, her moods. His mission becomes keeping her happy, and in that pursuit, he loses touch with his own. This is an unsustainable and self-destructive path. It leads to burnout, resentment, and a hollowed-out version of the man she was initially attracted to. He becomes needy, not because he is inherently weak, but because he has made her his primary source of emotional sustenance. A woman may enjoy this power initially, but she will never respect it. She can feel the weight of his dependence, and it becomes a burden, not a gift. Doing less is the conscious decision to end this self-abandonment. It is the practice of redirecting that precious energy back to its rightful owner, you. When you stop being constantly available, you are not playing games. You are declaring that your time has a higher purpose. That purpose is your own growth, your goals, your hobbies, your friendships, and your vision for your life. This shift is palpable. It changes your posture, your tone, and your presence. You are no longer orbiting her. You are the center of your own solar system, and she is invited to join your orbit. This is not arrogance. It is integrity. It is the understanding that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and that the most valuable thing you can offer any relationship is a whole, fulfilled, and purpose-driven individual. This self-possession creates a magnetic paradox. The less you need her, the more she is often drawn to you. Your independence communicates abundance on a profound level. It tells her, silently and powerfully, my happiness and self-worth are not your responsibility. I am already complete. This removes an immense pressure from the relationship, transforming it from a source of essential validation into a space for shared joy and mutual enhancement. She is with you not because you need her, but because you choose her. And being chosen by a man who has other options, not just other women, but a compelling life of his own, is infinitely more meaningful than being needed by a man who has nothing else. The man who emerges from this practice is fundamentally different. He is not defined by the relationship's outcome. If she leaves, it is a profound loss, but it is not an annihilation. His core identity, built on his purpose and self-respect, remains intact. This unshakable foundation makes him unbreakable in the face of rejection and graceful in the face of success. He knows that his value does not fluctuate with her opinions or actions. It is a constant, built through daily discipline and a commitment to his own standards. This is the man who commands respect without demanding it. He does not beg for love. He inspires it. He is not consumed by the fear of loss because he is too engaged in the process of building his own life. And in the end, that is the ultimate reward. Doing less is the path to becoming that man, a man who is not just unforgettable to her, but truly deeply content and powerful within himself, with or without a partner. The relationship ceases to be the source of his life and becomes a beautiful, enriching part of it.